Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear students, welcome back to our course English Literature of the 17th century. Today is our 8th lecture, and it will be about a poem entitled, as you can see, Virtue by George Herbert. And if you still remember, this is our second poem. We finished already a poem entitled To Daffodils by Robert Herrick, and this is our second poem by a poet called or entitled or named George Herbert. Okay, so this poem is also important, the same as the previous one. Please study it well. Definitely there will be some questions about this poem and the final exam. Okay, what you need is to concentrate on the materials, as I said, that I'm giving to you in my lectures. Okay, so now let's start having first some information about our poet George Herbert. And as you can see on the screen, George Herbert was born into a wealthy and titled family at Montgomery Castle in Wales on April 3rd, 1593. As I said before in the previous lectures, the dates are important because you might have some questions about the dates, which date this poet or that dramatist was born in. So please, when you are reading any of the dates, when any of the dates come on your way, please pay attention to it. It's important. The date is important. So this our poet here, George Herbert, as you can see, was born in 1593 as one of 9 children. So it was a big family. His father, Sir Richard Herbert, died in 1596. Of course, a date like this about the father of the poet or something like this is not important. Only the dates about the dramatists or the poets are important. When George was 3 years old, his mother, Lady Magdalene Newport Herbert, was a patron of the poet, and clergyman John Donne was presided at her funeral when she died in 1627. Herbert's first poems were Latin sonnets. So when he started writing poems, his early poems were not written in English, but they were written in Latin, and they were sonnets that he wrote for his mother. In these poems, he argued that a more fitting subject for poetry than love for a woman was love for God. So from this line, you can guess that he has that religious faith, and he believes, of course, more in the love for God more than the love for woman. So again, in them he argued that in these poems, which he wrote in Latin and he wrote for his mother, he said that he argued that a more fitting subject for poetry, he believes that poetry should concentrate more on love for God more than love for woman. His first published verses appeared in 1612. So his first published verses, the first verses of Herbert, they were published in 1612. They were 2 poems, and only they were 2 poems, no more, also in Latin. And even the first verses that were published, also they were written in Latin. And they were written in memory of King James's son, Prince Henry, who had died that year. Okay, so still his early poems, as you can see, were written in Latin sonnets, and even those the first two poems that were published also, they were written in Latin, and they were written in memory of King James's son, Prince Henry. Okay, on March 1, 1633, Herbert died of tuberculosis. He died of that disease, not of cancer, not of any fever, not of any of these things, but he died from tuberculosis. And of course, you need to check the meaning of this word to know what kind of disease is this one. And again, he died in 1633. By all accounts, Herbert was a gentle and pious person with a sweet and generous nature. So he was known by his generosity, and he was well liked and popular person for these nice characteristics that he has. He helped rebuild the decaying church because he has that faith from the very beginning, as we previously said, that he believed in the love for God more than love for woman. Of course, that feelings that he has, that faith that he has, of course, he will direct him to these religious institutes like churches and all these things. So he helped rebuild the decaying church at Bemerton with his own money, and was loved and esteemed by his parishioners, whom he cared for spiritually and when necessary by sharing in their labor or giving them money. So he, as you can see, he was a great helper to the church and to the religious people at that time. Okay, now we have an introduction about the poem that we have, Virtue. And of course, you can get the theme, the main theme of the poem from the title. The title is Virtue, and sure you know the meaning of the word virtue. So you can guess what will the poem be. So introduction, we have here Virtue is one of the poems in a collection of verse called the Temple. So it was not written alone, this poem Virtue, but it was included with some other verses, and this collection was called the Temple in 1633, which George Herbert wrote during the last 3 years of his life. So these collection of poems, these poems were written only during the last 3 years of his life. He didn't start writing these poems, but he wrote them only in the last 3 years of his death. He appreciates the beauty of creation, not only for its own sake, but also because he sees it as a mirror of the goodness of the Creator. Okay? So the beauty of the universe, the beauty of the world, not only for its own sake, he enjoys and he appreciates and praises the beauty of the world and the beauty of the universe, not just for the sake of its beauty, but for the sake of proving the greatness and the goodness of the Creator, God, of course. So he believes this beauty of the world is an indication of the greatness and goodness of Almighty God. Okay. Yet, despite Herbert's sense of the world's loveliness, his poems often reflect the transcendence of that beauty and the folly of investing it with any real value. So again, let me read this again. Yet, despite Herbert's sense of the world's loveliness, in spite of his feelings of these loveliness of the world, his poems often reflect the transcendence of that beauty and the folly of investing it with any real value. So we have to appreciate this to have a real value of the existence of the world. In Virtue, he presents a vision of an eternal world beyond the one available to sense. So in Virtue, he presents a vision of an internal world. He has a certain vision of the internal world beyond the one available to sense. Herbert's poetry displays a conjunction of intellect and emotion. In Virtue, again, an example of this combination of the intellectual and the sensuous can be seen in the second line of the third quatrain. Of course, when we are reading the poem, and we have, of course, explanation about the poem, definitely you will know what's written in each line. So when the spring is compared to a box of compressed sweet. In Virtue also, which comprises 4 quatrains, and you need to know what are these quatrains. Quatrains similar like stanza, just a few lines to make quatrains. So the poem, when you look at it, you can get or you can see that the poem is composed of 4 quatrains, like 4 stanzas altogether. Herbert reflects on the loveliness of the living world, but also on the reality of death. So it's quite similar. If you still remember what we said about the previous poem to Daffodils, it's similar theme, you know, which is life versus death, and life is short, and death comes very soon to end our lives and to end the lives of the other creatures. And we are supposed to move to another eternal world, which is the hereafter. Okay, so the 2 themes of these 2 poems, to Daffodils and Virtue, you feel that the two themes are similar to a great extent, and they are about life and death. Okay, so again in Virtue, which comprises 4 quatrains altogether, Herbert reflects on the loveliness of the living world, but also on the reality of death, which is a real thing, that the death is a real thing which no one can deny. So whenever we live, definitely there will be an end to our lives. So this is the main theme which George Herbert is trying here to emphasize and is trying here to assert, which is the loveliness of the living world, that the world in which we are living is a lovely one, is a nice one, full of pleasures and full of happiness, but at the same time we shouldn't forget the reality of death, that everything will die at the end and no one will live forever. Okay, so now this is the poem, starting with the poem that we have here. These are, if you look at this, so this is what we call quatrains. So if you look, this is number 1, this is number 2, number 3, and this is also number 4. So this is number 4. This is starting with only a sweet and virtuous. So as we see, as we can see that the poem consists of 4 quatrains. Okay, now let me read the poem to you, and definitely we will explain each line. We will show the main theme, we will show the main ideas and everything in the poem. It's an interesting and it's also quite simple. I'm quite sure that you will be able to understand it and enjoy it, inshallah. So again, this is a poem entitled Virtue by our poet George Herbert, and as you can see the date in front of you, he was born in 1593 and he died in 1632. Okay, so this is the date of his birth, and also this is the date of his death. Sweet day, so cool. Sweet day, speaking to the day. So cool, so calm, so bright. The bridal of the earth and sky. The dew shall weep thy fall tonight. The dew shall weep thy fall. Weep means to shed tears. Shed tears. The dew shall weep thy fall tonight, for thou must die. I think the words are quite clear in front of you, and you can, of course, you can guess the meaning. You can read what's written here between the lines. So let me read again the first quatrain, or the first stanza. We have the poet here as speaking to the day and describing it as a sweet day. So sweet day, so cool, so calm, so bright. The bridal of the earth, these enjoyments and these pleasures of the earth and sky. The dew shall weep thy fall tonight, for thou must die. Okay, now let's move to the second quatrain, the second stanza. After speaking to the day and describing it as sweet day, now moving to speak to the rose, also saying, sweet rose, whose hue angry and brave bids the rash gazer wipe his eye. Thy root is ever in its grave, and thou must die. So again, repeating the same idea. So speaking to the rose, saying whenever beauty you have, whenever your beauty is enchanting to anyone who is looking at you, definitely that beauty will end, because thou here means you. So thou here means you. So thou must die. Again, sweet rose, whose hue angry and brave bids the rash gazer wipe his eye. Thy root is ever in its grave, and thou must die. Okay, now let's move to the third quatrain, or the third stanza. After speaking to day and after speaking to rose and describing them as sweet, now in the third quatrains, or the third stanza, speaking to spring and saying, sweet spring, full of sweet days, sweet spring, full of sweet days and roses. A box where sweets compacted lie, where sweets compacted lie. My music, show ya have your closes, and all must die. So again, it's the same idea repeated. Even the sweetest spring, with all the sweet days, the pleasures, with all these happiness that we have during the time of spring, with the nice weather, the nice time, the nice sceneries, definitely you will die at the end. So must die at the end. And in the last stanza, in the last quatrain, quatrain number 4, he said, only a sweet and virtuous soul, like seasoned timber, never gives. So only if you have sweet and virtuous soul, in this case, this soul never gives. Here, the word never gives here means never dies. So this virtuous soul never dies. Even if our bodies died, if our bodies disappeared, but these virtuous souls will never die and will never disappear. So again, only a sweet and virtuous soul, like seasoned timber, never gives. But thou, the whole world, turn to cool, then chiefly lives. Okay, so only a sweet and virtuous soul, like seasoned timber, never gives. But thou, the whole, but though the whole world turn to cool. So when the whole world turn to cool, when everything vanishes in the world, when no one is there on earth, then chiefly lives. So this soul, this virtuous soul, will live. I think the idea is quite clear now. So if we go back again to the poem, reading it once more, definitely it would be quite easy to you to trace the idea, to trace the theme from the very beginning to the end. So again, let's read the poem, and I think now you can trace the theme, trace the idea on which this poem is built. So again, this poem was written by a poet named George Herbert. He was born in 1593 and 1632. So again, sweet day, so cool, so calm, so bright, the bridal of the earth and sky, the dew shall weep thy fall tonight. So the dew shall weep thy fall tonight. So when you ends, when you dies, the dew of the morning that we have shall weep thy fall tonight. So that day definitely ends with the coming of the night. So with this brightness, with this loveliness that we have in the day, now this day definitely will come to an end when when night replaces it and comes in its place. So sweet day, so cool, so calm, so bright, the bridal of the earth and the sky, the dew shall weep thy fall tonight, for thou must die. You must die, you must have your end. The second, sweet rose, again speaking to the rose, whose hue angry and brave bids the rash gather. The rash gather, the word gather comes from the word gaze, to stare, to look carefully at something. Why that this gather, the one who is staring and looking at the rose, will shed tears. That gather will wipe his eye, because thy root is ever in its grave. So all the time your root is in grave, which is of course a symbol of death, permanent death. So whenever this rose lives, definitely it will die, because the root is in its grave, and thou again must die. Okay, again, the third quatrain, sweet spring, full of sweet days and roses, books where sweet compacted lie, and my music here, of course, by the word the music here, the poet means his poem. So his poem, he describes it as music. So he said, my music, my poem, shows you have your closes. So your closes means your death, your end. Okay, and all must die. And he ended with this stanza or this quatrain about the virtuous soul. He said, only a sweet and virtuous soul, like seasoned timber, never gives. So only the virtuous soul never gives, never dies. But though the whole world turn to coal, then chiefly lives, which means that the soul will live forever and will never die. Okay, now we need to have a look at the explanation of the lines of the poem, starting with lines from number 1 to number 4, which is of course an explanation to the first stanza or the first quatrain. Okay, now let's read again the first stanza, because we need to remember this stanza, these lines when we are explaining them. So please, let's go back now. This is the first one. This is the explanation to these lines from 1 to 4. Speaking again to the day, sweet day, so cool, so calm, so bright, the bridal of the earth and the sky, the dew shall weep thy fall tonight, for thou must die. Okay, please remember these lines, and let's now check the explanation to these lines. So Herbert begins virtue, and this is the title of our poem here. So he begins virtue with an apostrophe or invocation. That is, here he starts with a direct rhetorical address to a personified thing, as if speaking to the day. The narrator says, sweet day, and then characterizes the day as cool. He describes the day as cool, calm, and bright. So he characterizes the day as cool, calm, and bright. So these are the adjectives that he gives to the date. He characterizes the day as cool, calm, and bright. Okay, thus for one noun, for the noun that he starts the poem with, the day, he provides 4 adjectives. So we find that he mentioned the day, and then he provides 4 adjectives. The rest of the lines is made up of the adverbial so cool, so calm, so bright, signifying intensity. Repeated 3 times. So. The sweet day is the bridal, the marriage. The word the bridal here, the marriage, the conjunction or union of the earth and the sky. So he believes that the day is the marriage between earth and sky. This is the union, the connection, the conjunction. The day is connecting and is unifying the sky and the earth. So he said that the sweet day is the bridal, the marriage, the conjunction or union of the earth and the sky. Okay? So now, day, however, gives way to night, just as life gives way to death. This line is very important because the main theme lies in this line. So day, however, gives way to night, which means that the day has to leave, has to be aside and leave the whole stage, the whole field to the night, which will replace and will come instead of it. So day, however, gives way to night, just as life gives way to death. So life gives way to death, which means leaves the whole place to death to come and replace it. The dew shall weep thy fall tonight. The narrator asserts turning a daily natural event, nightfall, the nightfall, into a metaphor. Beyond death, the line also suggests grief at the loss of the paradise on Adam, the fall, which is the original cause of death in Judeo-Christian story of the creation. Okay, now let's move. The evening dew, invested with emotion and made to represent grief. So the dew, invested with emotion and made to represent grief, is equated with tears, so which are shed at nightfall over the fall, the sin that brought death into the world. So again, like tears. Okay, now let's move to the second quatrain, the second stanza, and we have here these lines from number 5 to number 8. We in the first stanza we have only 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when we move to the second stanza we have 5, 6, 7, 8, which are these lines in the second. So this is the explanation to the second stanza. So lines 5 to 8 in the beginning of the second quatrains, in the beginning of the second quatrain, second stanza, with the word sweet. Herbert continues to connect the beauty of nature with impermanence, as any sweet thing must over time lose its sweetness. So again, affirming the idea that everything, every beautiful thing, every sweet thing that we have in this world definitely will lose its beauty and its sweetness and will die at the end. So like the day, of course you remember in the first stanza or the first quatrain he spoke about the day, and in the second he is speaking here about the rose. And the rose has the same fate like day, which means that they will come to an end and they will die. So like the day, the rose is an emblem of earthy splendor. It is sweet like the day. So the rose is sweet like the day, saturated with color and graced with magnificence. Angry and brave are complex words in Herbert's usage as aspects of their meanings have all but passed from English. Okay, now as with the day, so with the rose, despite its leavening splendor, a splendor death awaits. So in spite of these beauty that and these magnificence that the rose has, definitely death is waiting for it to end all these beauty and all these splendor. So thy wrote, and speaking here thy to the rose, thy wrote buried in the earth, as it must be if the rose is to flourish, is ever in its grave. Thus life and death are entwined, and death is an ever-present aspect of life. So whenever you find life, sure, you will find death. So indeed, by emphasizing the common ground shared by the root, the source of life, and the grave, the receptacle for death, Herbert evokes two Christian lessons. So he believes that there are two Christian lessons that we can get in this point. First, that life contains elements of death. Life contains element of death and must inevitably give way to death. And second, that death is not finality. So life will end by death, but death in itself is not a final destination, but part of the continuum of the existence, which he believes that death is a transitional state, a transitional case to a permanent world, to eternity, and in the hereafter. So in awareness of death, one realizes the true meaning and purpose of life, and will thus prepare his or her soul through the exercises of virtue for eternity, which means that all the time, he believes that all the time we have to be prepared for that moment in which death will come and in which death will end our lives. So we have to be prepared for this, and we have what we call the exercise of virtue. You have to train yourself to make your soul accustomed to to virtue and to these nice characteristics that a person should have. Okay, now lines from 9 to 12. The word sweet begins the third quatrains as well, now describing the spring. And in the third quatrains, he is describing here the spring, which is subsequently characterized as full of sweet days and roses. As such, the delights presented in the first two quatrains are contained in the third, and the narrator solidifies his suggestions of the earth's reaches bounty in the second line of the quatrain. Spring is like to a books where sweets complicate. Let me check something before we move. Okay, so now let's again return to this. The line again, starting from 9 to 12, we have here the word sweet begins the third quatrains as well, now describing the spring, which subsequently characterized as full of sweet days and roses. And such, the delights presented in the first two quatrains are contained in the third, and the narrator solidifies his suggestions of the earth's rich bounty. In the second line of the quatrain, spring here is likened to a box. He likened the spring to a box where sweets compacted lie. Okay, now this is the last slide. Then, as in the previous quatrains, the third line iterates the transience of earthly delights. He said, my music, and of course by my music he means my poem, shows you have your clothes. Though this line, the narrator offers the poem itself as a proof of his argument regarding the impermanence of things, which means that he says that his poem is a proof of this temporality of things, that everything will come to an end, even his poem will come also to an end. Okay, I have already finished this lecture number 8. Thank you very much. Inshallah, we will meet next lecture, lecture number 9, to continue explaining this interesting poem by George Herbert, the poem version. Thank you very much. See you inshallah next lecture. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.